The other thing we want to make perfectly clear is that we also supporting women who find themselves pregnant, who need services,
Right.
who need help to get through it and to thrive as she leads a new family. We want her to be successful. We know she has needs, and we want to be there for her because abortion is just not a good solution for her. Abortion is not a healthy solution. It is certainly not health care. And we need to be, the party of that, too.
Revolution of common sense.
Revolution of common sense.
A revolution of common sense.
Truth was once common sense, but today, truth is uncommon. Explore biblical truths around faith, business, and politics with Peter Demas. Uncommon Sense in Current Times.
Hey folks, welcome to Uncommon Sense in Current Times. Today I'm excited to have back Sue Liebel. She is the State Affairs Director for the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. She has worked decades in policy development, lobby, and political strategy. And the states are grappling with abortion policy after Roe v. Wade was overturned. She works with pro-life lawmakers and advocates states to advance pro-life laws. I'm real excited to have her on because something kind of new has come up, and that was on January the 6th. President Trump told House Republicans, he says, quote, "You got to be a little bit flexible on Hyde." And he's referencing the Hyde Amendment, which is a policy which has prohibited taxpayer funding abortion since 1976. Now, he was talking about it, I think, in relation to healthcare legislation that he wants to pass. So Sue, thank you so much for being on the program. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I want to be really clear and make certain that everybody thinks clear. I abhor abortion. I believe it is the taking of innocent human life. My conviction is not wavered on it. But when it comes to the Hyde Amendment, I guess my question, and where it kind of starts, is this: it feels to me like it's just a temporary restraint. Now, granted, it's been around for 40, 50 years now, but it just kind of limits who pays for abortion in some places. It doesn't deal, in my opinion, with the underlying problem. In some states, it doesn't seem to impact at all. So I kind of want to ask questions along those lines. But before we get to that, there's some people that may not know what the Hyde Amendment is. So can you describe that and talk about how that works in this situation?
I sure can. And that's a great place to start. The Hyde Amendment was proposed by then Congressman Henry Hyde. It's 50 years ago. It's been 50 years, which basically says that no taxpayer dollars will pay for abortion, for elective abortion especially, of course. It protects us from having to pay for it. It unfortunately has to be reauthorized over and over again. It didn't just, do it once and it's in there forever. So Democrats designed Obamacare when Obamacare was, first designed and passed with the Obama administration. So they designed it to sidestep the Hyde Amendment. They put in an accounting gimmick and it forces us taxpayers to pay for elective abortion. And but for decades, the Hyde Amendment has been an unshakable bedrock principle and a minimum standard for the Republican Party for the pro-life. I'm with you. I abhor all abortion. Of course, Susan B. Anthony's mission, our Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America mission, is to end abortion. That's our vision and our goal for all the work that we do. But until we do, unfortunately, have the votes to do that, we certainly don't want to pay for it. And we don't want America to have a principle for our country, like other countries unfortunately do, of paying for it. But it's always been a minimum standard. It's always been, besides life itself, a bedrock principle. And now Trump and a few Republicans have suggested abandoning that to cave to the Democrats to get enough votes for a health care proposal.
So my question is, because money's fungible, and I remember when I was I remember when I was a lot more liberal before I became a Christian in college. And I remember there was some issue where Planned Parenthood was upset over not getting funding. And I remember thinking, okay, well, it doesn't really matter. You're still getting funding for the other stuff. You just can't use that fund. You can't target that fund.
That's right.
So instead, I take fund that would normally go to A and I move it over here to B. And the funds that I can't get used for B, I just put back in A, and it doesn't seem to have an
Well,
impact. Hyde to me feels that same way. It feels like, okay, well, we can't do it. So the states aren't getting this money anymore, but now they're doing it with whatever they want to do it with, and then they just put it right back into their coffers in another way.
and this,
Am I wrong in that?
well, it's certainly in states that are pro-choice, like Colorado and New York and California, have now the Dobbs decision, which we are all grateful for, but nonetheless, we're back to what state's going to do what. So now we have a patchwork of 50 different states and what they do. My state, for example, does not pay for anything. However, in this particular situation, the Hyde Amendment can apply. For example, remember the One Big Beautiful Bill last summer? It applies to Medicaid funds. So whatever state you're in, you can't use Medicaid funds except for, of course, life of the mother or something, extreme situation. But in this particular instance we're talking about today, extending Obamacare, if you'll remember, Obamacare has whoever wants to be on Obamacare purchasing an insurance plan. So it's those insurance company plans in whatever state you are on the exchange that if Hyde were applied, would not be able to include abortion, pay for abortion with those plans, except of course for those emergency, exceptions. So really what we're talking about here in this particular situation is not putting Hyde in this extension of Obamacare, and then the people that are on Obamacare would be paying for abortion. And that's
Okay.
for Republicans to do that, for a president and a pro-life party to do that is unthinkable.
Well, and I guess, and that's kind of, and then the next question I would have on that is for states that, like Tennessee, like other states that said no, we're not going to have it at all. We're banning abortion here. The Hyde Amendment wouldn't even apply to them anyway because they wouldn't even allow it. So Obamacare wouldn't allow it to happen or
Well,
bypass it,
Obamacare
or does it?
without the Hyde Amendment, which is the problem here, would allow that, unless Tennessee, for example, passed another law that said none of the insurance policies on the exchange in our state could pay for abortion. So
But
then
if
we're back to the
if
states on
abortion
that.
can't happen, but if abortion can't happen anyway, doesn't that? I mean, there's nothing to pay for if
Well,
I'm not allowed to pay for it. So does it actually? So does this only work in the 25, 30 states that do allow abortion in this situation? Does it only impact that, I guess, if Hyde went away?
well, and those states, it would affect any state that has exceptions. Even Tennessee would have life of the mother or
Right.
rape and incest or something like that, right? Those, whatever, each state's different on that too.
Right.
But also, those other states that we're talking about still have hundreds of thousands of abortion in New York, California, Illinois, Colorado.
Right.
So we would ultimately, it's fungible, be paying for those. I mean, sooner or later, right? But actually, there's also so yes and no is the answer to that. It's complicated. I know it's really complicated, and it's about health
all legal
insurance.
stuff is always yes, no, and
Right,
maybe.
I know. I'm sorry, and it's about health insurance, and that's complicated too. However, it's also a foundational bedrock principle of the Republican Party, and it was. You might remember that in the summer before the 24 election, the Republican Party rewrote its platform on life and backed off of a few things then too. So it's just it's a trend that we see with our pro-life party. And for it to be the Hyde Amendment, for us to pay for that now. Also, it's also politically suicidal for the GOP. After the Democrats back in 2010 sidestepped and didn't put the Hyde Amendment into Obamacare, they did a little song and dance. And since then, the Hyde Amendment has not been in Obamacare. 15 House Democrats lost their seats, and the GOP gained seats at that time. And the blowback will be much greater this time if Republicans betray the pro-life movement on this standard now. They're going to lose the midterms. It will depress the base and the turnout in the midterms in November. If just 1% to 2% of pro-lifers stay home next November, Trump would, or if they had stayed home last time, Trump would not be president. So you don't want to depress your base. You don't want to run afoul of, actually, polling shows that 6 in 10 voters don't want their tax dollars to pay for abortion. I've been doing this a long time. And as you know, every year there's a poll, do people want abortion or not abortion?
Right.
Where lots of polling on everything. But the one, all the time I've done this, the one consistently high poll is somewhere 75%, 77%, consistently all these years, that people don't want their taxpayer dollars to pay for abortion. And that would be pro-choice people. That would be people who want abortion. That would be pro-lifers. 6 in 10 people don't want their tax dollars to go to pay for abortion. And so the polling has been super clear for years on this. We just worry. Well, first of all, very disappointed in the GOP and the president after all the things they've done. Pro-life, they're backing up on this, but we're also doing our part. Susan B. Anthony, I don't need to get political today, but that's another side of the Susan B. Anthony house is endorsing and knocking on doors for candidates that are pro-life. Last year, we reached 10 million voters in 8 battleground states. And so we are prepared in the midterms. We have about $80 million to spend now. And we would not like to have to help rearrange who is in leadership in the Republican Party. So we really need our pro-life party to hold strong, to insist on the Hyde Amendment. If they're going to reauthorize Obamacare. I'm not here to talk about Obamacare itself as a health insurance, plan.
Right.
I'm just talking about whether or not that it would have funding for abortion.
So, one thing I didn't think of until you were talking about this is that if the Hyde Amendment was repealed, that me in the state of Tennessee would be paying for abortions in the state of California. So even though they aren't necessarily going here because it's going through Obamacare, and I never really considered it through that backdoor process before. But what if, since he's doing this in relation to passing a health care plan, what if the plan eliminated that? Would that then would that make the Hyde Amendment not worth anything anymore? So if he says get rid of the Hyde Amendment, but we're going to get rid of this provision in Obamacare, then would that not just kind of cancel itself out?
You mean a provision that Obamacare would pay for abortion?
That it would eliminate that completely. Like if he's saying I'm going to scrap Obamacare, I'm going to create my own new health care, there won't be any health care, will not provide for any abortion whatsoever. So now we can kind of relax and be flexible on Hyde because of that. Now again, this is purely hypothetical. I have no idea what he's doing.
Right.
Right. And I'm thankful I don't know what he's doing. Sometimes for the worse and the better. But but is that possible that that's also the approach that's being taken?
I don't think so. And I also don't think, practically speaking, there would be the votes in Congress to do that. They still have to negotiate, and this is what the holdup is. They still have to negotiate with the Democrats because we need 60 votes. right? So
Sure.
that's what's actually happening here is the Democrats are holding firm. You might remember kind of before Christmas with the shutdown, um, the Democrats held off a really long time before all that happened. And one of the crux of their arguments was abortion funding, was this very thing. And I think it was President Trump that said, okay, hold on. Obamacare is a big, complicated issue. Why don't we put that aside and not shut down the government over it? And then we'll get back to that and renegotiate that on its own terms at its own time. We'll give it the attention it deserves instead. And that's what they're doing now is, okay, we got through the shutdown thing. Now we got to get back to this Obamacare extension. And frankly, I've got to tell you, Peter, I do understand, and we all understand the barrel that they are over. Um, Regardless of what you think about Obamacare, the extension is for is for the subsidies, so that keeps the prices lower. So when someone
Yeah.
would buy a plan, a healthcare plan on the exchange, their actual real price um, is lowered by this money. So you're not it. So it's even a fake thing right off the bat because they're subsidizing those plans because under the real Obamacare it would have been way too expensive. So that's what they're doing right now is is negotiating over that. If they don't do that, then prices will go sky high for people on Obamacare, and they don't want that. They don't want that right before the midterms. They don't want that to happen, and so but you have to have 60 votes in the U.S. Senate, and the Democrats have them, are negotiating this very thing. So, at some point, I mean, negotiate over something else, right? Don't let that be the Hyde Amendment. To see that's where we are in this day and age is that Democrats are holding the line because they want abortion funding and they want abortion anyway. So
Yeah.
that's what's going on. And it's a difficult thing. There's no doubt about that. But to throw out a 50-year bedrock, it's for the pro-life community, besides life itself, this is probably the second most important principle is we don't want to fund it. We don't want to be fungible with it. We don't want to move the shell game around and we don't want any of our money going for abortion. And 6 in 10 people, agree with that. They're really on shaky ground here. And we'd hate to see the pro-life movement stay home.
Our culture doesn't need more noise from Christians. It needs prepared boldness. Jesus often warned us to be ready before the moment arrives. And in the same sense, boldness trains us to be ready. But are you training to be bold? You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your level of preparation. That's the purpose of my newest book, Bold Not Belligerent. We look at the obstacles that prevent you from being bold and the disciplines for when the moment arrives. Be prepared long before pressure comes so you can stand when the moment arrives. What would it take for us to make the Hyde Amendment permanent then, where it's not always coming up, so we don't have to fight this battle every single time? What it
It's a
does is
great
it the same
question.
thing? Is it still 60 votes or
Mhm.
is it something else?
It's the 60 votes.
Mhm.
hmm So, I mean, the old adage is, that elections have consequences, and who you vote for makes makes the rules. And how many votes we have is what we can get out of the process. And so, unfortunately, that they have wings in the U.S. Senate when we have to negotiate, and they're holding the line. And I know that's difficult, but Hyde is not the end. Doing away with that is not the answer. Um, Even President Trump has repeatedly promised to make the Hyde Amendment permanent in the law, including in healthcare coverage. He's pledged that before. Um, One of his first actions upon taking office last year was prioritizing reversing President Biden's. President Biden tried to take Hyde out of everything he could. Trump pledged tried to put Hyde and everything back into everything he could. And the president said very clearly, it's the policy of the United States, consistent with the Hyde Amendment, to end end the forced use of federal dollars to fund or promote elective abortion. So President Trump and congressional Republicans know exactly what they're doing. They've pledged to do the opposite, and not abandon this commitment. They've got to stay firm with their pledge.
Now, Republicans are also saying that, especially those that are kind of in the more purple areas, the more purple districts, they're saying that they have to be flexible and Hyde in order to win the election, so that later it's kind of the argument of I will give up a battle here so that I could try to win the war later.
Right.
What do you think about the logic of that?
I think that, and Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, thinks that it is not wise to play hard and fast with the lives of unborn children.
Yeah, it's a fair statement. I
Yeah.
mean, that's you know, but if and to their point, and again, I agree. Again, I agree with you on this, but to their point on this, if they lose the election and they have somebody in who is advocating the murder of children, not just
Right.
not just kind of wishy-washy on the fence with it, where they'll go along with the majority, is that not worse?
Well, it would be very bad, except for one thing, Peter. 6 in 10 Americans don't want to pay for abortion. So they're on solid ground in any campaign, even in a purple or even a bright blue state. People don't want their tax dollars paying for abortion. And that, again, that's been, as long as I've been doing that, that's been consistently the top highest poll. So we're on very firm ground here politically, to not include the Hyde Amendment. Maybe other things, whether or not the FDA will stop allowing the pills to be mailed. There's so many other things going on that are a little bit, that are still very, very important. But you just don't mess with Hyde. You don't mess with unborn lives. It's not a political tool.
If Hyde were to disappear, even for a moment, obviously the impact on it would be big. But what other areas would you say that are important? Obviously, the abortion pill you just mentioned, but are there other areas and other pieces of legislation that could kind of come back, maybe that was there in the 80s, or maybe new, that can effectively do the same thing? One of the things that is fascinating to me about politics is we can eliminate A, but then pass laws B, C, and D, and it just essentially replaced A. Just no one saw it happen. Is there an approach? Are y'all looking at that possibility? Because I know it had to be a shock when Trump said, "Hey, yeah, let's be flexible here." And I mean, there had to have been some scrambling going on in that area. Are y'all anticipating that or preparing for that just in case?
A shock wave. I could almost see it went throughout the country. I mean, it was just the limestone cracked. It just shocking and so disappointing. I think right now, to be honest with you, I mean, yes, there will be other things to do, other ways to go around, put your finger in the dike. But they're not solid. They're not rational necessarily. They're not expected. And we'll deal with that when that day comes. But if that day comes, we will have just had one party that we could count on for life to reject life. And so now we'll have the Democrat Party, of course, which is full on abortion up until birth, and the Republicans that we can't count on like we thought we could. So we just don't recommend any sort of negotiations like that. Again, playing hard and fast. There are plenty of other issues that we still need to deal with, unfortunately, in this pro-life space. Unfortunately, there are so many policies, either at the federal or at the state level, that need shoring up to protect more lives. But Hyde has protected 2.6 million lives, And so we're talking about a large tool, a tool for lots of lives, right? And also just the foundational bedrock of a party that we can count on.
Is it possible that the reason why the Republicans are moving in that direction is because the Democrats have taken such a far step? So a Republican that might be waffling on Hyde looks reasonable now because, I mean, when abortion first started, it was, well, just safe, and it just needs to be safe. And then it
Yeah.
moved to, then it just slowly kept moving. And it seems like the Republicans have continued to move along with it, like they're the ones leading the leash that's going with it. Do you think that is part of the problem? Should Susan B. Anthony and other organizations like that start targeting more Democrats, maybe to try to pull it back a little bit? Is that a possibility as well?
Well, Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, always targets um, pro-choice Democrats, especially in the U.S. Senate. And we go into their states and knock on doors for the pro-life candidate. And like I said, we were in 8 states last year, especially on the ground, and reached 10 million voters and spent $98 million. And so, I mean, because who gets elected makes the laws. So it's really important who sits in those seats. But I think I'd like to answer your question in a different way. In 2022 and recent elections, the Republican Party and their political consultants have been promoting a false narrative that the life issue is not a winning issue for campaigns. And so, especially their consultants are telling them, don't talk about it. People
Right.
want abortion, don't do it. And we have all of the research, all of the numbers. We worked with Kellyanne Conway, whose day job is marketing and focus groups and things like that with consumers to understand where voters are and consumers are. We know that that's not true. That is a false narrative. And so, in fact, we can prove with certain other elections that were happening in those years, the candidate that said, yes, I'm pro-life, I do believe in life, and I will vote to protect it. If you think I'm extreme, you ought to see my opponent over here who wants abortion up to
Right.
birth and, all of this, and calling that out. I mean, kindly, nicely, but standing firm that I am for life. That is who I am, and that's what I'm going to vote for. And if you think I'm extreme, you should look at the Democratic Party platform. You should look at my opponent. That works. And unfortunately, the Republican Party thinks it does not, and has wavered on that over the last couple of cycles. Also, watering down the party platform a little bit on life. And so we are seeing the party kind of wavering, but we have been trying to show the party that that's actually not the case out here in the in America, in middle America especially, but in some of these states, it's a winning issue. It just doesn't have to be. We don't have to step in those political landmines. Your candidate isn't going to step into a landmine, right? Like some have in the past. We know how to do that and to talk about that. The other thing we want to make perfectly clear is that we also supporting women who find themselves pregnant, who need services,
Right.
who need help to get through it and to thrive as she leads a new family. We want her to be successful. We know she has needs, and we want to be there for her because abortion is just not a good solution for her. Abortion is not a healthy solution. It is certainly not health care. And we need to be, the party of that too, and that can all mix together nicely, Peter, in candidates that we want to see get elected.
So, You have enlightened me quite a bit on this Hyde Amendment because honestly, I just kind of thought it was just kind of we're just holding on to it because we've had it. But as you're describing it, and I never really put it in context of Obamacare, and with this as well, I think it's very valuable that people reach out to their local politicians, both in Senate and in the House, to not be flexible with this and let them know that this is not a good thing. How do they find? Because a lot of times people don't know who to find, how to find it.
Mhm.
How do they find where
Yeah.
their local politician stands, and what do they do with it from there?
Actually, this is really easy. See, the House has already passed a bill that did not include Hyde. So now we turn our focus on the U.S. Senate. They're out. They're going to be home in the district this week, actually. So if you happen to see where they're going to be, but you can also just Google. I'm from Wyoming. Who are my two U.S. senators? Every state has two U.S. senators. Or I'm from Indiana. Who are my senators? And Google will tell you exactly who they are. There are two, and their Washington office or their office in your state, their local office. It'll just come right up just by Googling that, just by asking that question. Hmm.
Well, Sue, thank you so much. I
They need to hear
appreciate you
from you.
doing this.
Yeah, they need.
Uh, yeah, no, I don't think people realize the importance of that. I did lobbying work, a little bit of lobbying work for the Restaurant Association, and I was shocked when I was talking to them on the impact that it does have. Even if even if anything, it keeps them from fighting it. They don't want to fight it publicly, and so which is also very important as well. So. Again, I thank you for what you're doing. I thank you for enlightening, again, me and others on the importance of this. I think it's extremely valuable. For them to find out more about the Susan B. Anthony Right to Life, how do they go? Where do they go for that?
Right. Our website is very easy. It's sbaprolife.org. sbaprolife.org. Lots of good information, lots of very timely blogs and articles and things, and certainly a lot about the Hyde Amendment.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again. I appreciate you being on here, and let's pray that the Senate does the right
Yes,
thing.
yes, thank you. And thanks for having me.
Thank, thank you.